the curse unleashed. The cave had fallen silent again, but Daniel could hear nothing but the pounding of his heart, louder than the whispers that still echoed in the corners of his mind. The eerie light from the necklace cast long shadows across the crumbled altar, and he stood frozen, trapped in the aftermath of his reckless curiosity. He tore the necklace from his neck, the gemstone now glowing with an unnatural intensity, but the more he tried to pry it away, the stronger its grip became. It wasn't just a necklace anymore, it was a part of him rooted in his very soul. His skin crawled, the stone burning against his fingers as though it had fused with his flesh. No. No, this can't be real, Daniel gasped, backing away, desperate to escape its pull. The light from the gemstone flickered like a heartbeat, slow, deliberate, alive. But as he moved, the world around him began to shift again. The walls of the cave seemed to ripple, their edges warping and twisting as though the very fabric of reality was stretching. It was as if the cave had come alive, its stones shifting in time with the pulsating energy of the necklace. His limbs grew heavy, sluggish, and he fell to his knees, his breath shallow. Then from the darkness of the cave the whispers returned, louder now, sharper, more insistent. They weren't just voices anymore. They were shapes, crawling beneath his skin, taking root in his very thoughts. "You have awakened the true power," the voices said. "Now you will feel what we felt. You will never escape." Daniel's eyes widened in horror. He wanted to scream, to plead for mercy, but the words stuck in his throat. The air around him thickened with a pressure that was unbearable, crushing the breath from his chest. His heart raced, a panic seizing him as the necklace's light grew brighter, more blinding. He could no longer see anything but the pulsing glow, as though the light itself had consumed everything in its path. And then he heard it, a rumble deep beneath his feet. The ground trembled, and the very earth groaned as if awakening from a long slumber. The rift that had swallowed the Elderkin spirits, the ancient wound in the earth, began to widen, sending a wave of energy through the cave. Daniel's head spun as a force, both invisible and relentless, pulled him toward the rift. He stumbled forward, helpless to resist, his body floating as though it were no longer his own. The necklace's pull was stronger now than ever before. He was falling. The world blurred around him as he fell into the rift, his body weightless, sinking into the chasm that had opened beneath him. The voices became deafening, their cries twisting and distorting into something far darker than anything Daniel could have imagined. His mind reeled as memories, visions, and flashes of faces, twisted and deformed, rushed past him, too fast to comprehend. And then, with a sudden jolt, everything stopped. The silence was crushing. The cold was unbearable. Daniel found himself in a place unlike any he had ever seen. The ground beneath him was cracked and barren, blackened earth stretching for miles in every direction. The sky above was thick with swirling clouds, tinted an unnatural shade of purple, as though the sun itself had never shone here. The air was stagnant, the smell of decay heavy in his lungs. The very earth seemed dead, as if life had long since abandoned it. And standing before him in the distance was a figure. It was the Elderkin Elder, the one who had warned him. But this was no longer the peaceful, ancient figure Daniel had encountered before. The man's form was twisted, his body unnaturally gaunt and elongated, his eyes hollow and black as night. His face was contorted in a permanent grimace, and his body seemed to flicker in and out of existence, as though he were not entirely real. "You've done it now, haven't you?" the elder rasped, his voice now a chilling echo that vibrated through the barren land. "You've opened the way. You've unleashed it." Daniel stumbled back, fear seizing his chest. What is this place? Where am I?" The elder's hollow eyes glared at him, pity and sorrow mixed in their depths. "This is the void. The place between life and death, between the world of men and the unknown. The power you've awakened. It belongs to the ancient ones, the beings who once ruled this land. We sealed them away, buried them beneath the earth, and with them the knowledge they gave us. But now they are free." Daniel's pulse quickened, his mind racing. "The knowledge, the device, it was never meant for us, was it?" "No," the elder whispered, his voice sorrowful. "It was never meant for you. It was meant for those who came before us. The ones who walked in the stars, the ones who ruled the earth before time itself began. They gave us power beyond imagination. But we foolishly thought we could control it." Daniel's chest tightened as the implications of the elder's words sank in. "And now? What happens now?" The elder's lips curled into a grim smile, his form flickering violently. "Now, you pay the price." Suddenly the ground trembled once more. A deep, resonating hum filled the air, and the very earth seemed to crack open. From the fissures, ancient figures began to rise, beings that were once human but now twisted and monstrous. Their eyes glowed with an otherworldly light, and their forms shimmered like shifting shadows. The sky above grew darker, and the air was thick with an overwhelming sense of dread. Daniel fell to his knees, unable to move, unable to breathe. The figures closed in on him, their presence suffocating, their whispers clawing at his mind. He tried to scream, but no sound escaped his lips. The rift, the curse, had claimed him. And as the figures surrounded him, Daniel realized with chilling clarity that the knowledge he had sought, the truth he had uncovered, was not meant to be known. It was a force that devoured everything in its path, a power that could never be controlled, never understood. The Elderkin had sealed it away for a reason. But now it was free, and it would never let him go. This ancient civilization had technology that shouldn't exist. The Forgotten Ones. Long ago, deep in the misty forests of the Appalachian Mountains, there existed a civilization whose name had long been forgotten by the world. The elders of the nearby villages would tell hushed tales around the fire, speaking of a people who were neither fully of this world nor of the next. A strange tribe whose wisdom and power seemed beyond any mortal's understanding. These people, known only as the Elderkin, lived in the shadows of towering trees, their village hidden from the world by thick, swirling mists. Their houses were built not with the crude tools of the settlers, but with strange, smooth stones that shimmered in the moonlight as if they were alive. Some say these stones were gifted to them by beings who walked in the stars, while others believed they were the remains of something older. Something ancient, something that had been buried in the earth for eons. The Elderkin never spoke much of their origins. They were a quiet people, content with their way of life, living in harmony with the land and the spirits that resided within it. Yet they held secrets, secrets that stirred fear in the hearts of those who would dare ask too many questions. It was the arrival of a curious young man named Daniel that first sparked the interest of the nearby settlers. Daniel was a wanderer, a man with a thirst for knowledge, and he had heard the old stories about the Elderkin. He had come to the mountains seeking to uncover the truth of their existence, not fully aware of the consequences that would follow. One evening, after weeks of searching, Daniel stumbled upon the village hidden within the fog. The mist clung to him like a second skin, thick and damp, curling around his body as though it were trying to keep him from uncovering what lay beyond. The air was still, deathly quiet, as if even the wind dared not disturb the ancient land. As Daniel approached, his heart pounding with anticipation, he saw them, the Elderkin. They appeared before him, not in a way that would strike fear into a man's heart, but with an unsettling calm. Their eyes glimmered like distant stars, and their skin had an ethereal glow to it, as though they were made from the very mist that surrounded the village. They wore garments woven from a fabric that shimmered like silver, and their voices carried with them a haunting, melodic quality that seemed to echo in his mind. "Who are you, traveler?" the eldest among them asked. His voice was deep, but it felt ancient, like it had been spoken through the ages. "I am Daniel," he said, his voice shaking slightly despite his confidence. "I've heard stories of your people. I've come to learn your secrets." The Elderkin did not laugh, nor did they dismiss him. Instead, they looked at each other as if communicating without words, then nodded solemnly. "You seek knowledge, but not all knowledge should be known," the eldest said, his eyes narrowing. "There are things that should be forgotten, hidden away, for they carry with them a price. A price that no man or woman should ever pay." Daniel's curiosity burned within him, stronger than any caution he felt. "What price?" The Elderkin's gaze grew dark, and the air seemed to grow colder, heavier. "You do not understand the power you seek. We were once a great civilization, a people who commanded forces that should never have been controlled by mortal hands. Our technology, our knowledge, was too advanced for this world. We could reach into the earth and pull forth the very bones of the earth itself. We could summon fire and lightning from the heavens and shape the very air with a single thought." Daniel's eyes widened. "You had such power?" The Elderkin's expression turned grim. "We did. But such power comes with consequences. The spirits we called upon grew restless. The earth itself began to tremble beneath our feet. And so, we sealed away the knowledge we had learned, burying it deep within the earth, hiding it where it could never be found again. We did so to protect ourselves, to protect the world." Daniel felt a chill run down his spine, but he pressed on, driven by an insatiable hunger for the truth. "And now, you've hidden it away?" The Elderkin nodded slowly. "We have. But there are those who seek it. There are whispers, dark whispers, that the knowledge we buried is stirring once again. Some believe it can still be found, that the power can still be wielded." Daniel's heart raced. "Where is it?" Where is the knowledge? The elderkin did not answer immediately. Instead, the eldest man stepped closer to Daniel, his face just inches from his. It lies beneath the earth in a place where the living and the dead meet. But I warn you, those who seek it do not return. The knowledge is cursed. It changes those who find it. It twists them, bends their minds, and it will never let them go. Despite the warning, Daniel's desire to uncover the truth only grew stronger. He couldn't turn back now. He had to find out more. He had to know. I must see it for myself, he declared. The elderkin's eyes darkened, and for the first time, there was a flicker of emotion, fear, within them. Then you are no longer a traveler, Daniel. You're a fool. And you will not leave this place unscathed. But Daniel was already turning away, his mind set on the path ahead. The next day the elderkin led him to the entrance of the cave, an ancient fissure in the earth, so old that even the elderkin could not remember how it had come to be. The air around it was thick with a strange energy, humming like the pulse of a living creature. The entrance was marked with strange symbols that glowed faintly in the darkness, as though they had been written by the stars themselves. Remember what we've told you, the eldest elderkin said. Once you step inside you may never return. Daniel nodded, ignoring the cold weight of their warnings. He entered the cave, his footsteps echoing off the stone walls. As he descended deeper into the earth, he felt the temperature drop, and the air grow heavy, as though the cave itself was alive, watching him. It wasn't long before he came across the chamber. At the center of it stood a large stone altar, covered in ancient runes that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. And on the altar, it was there. The device. It was a strange contraption, unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. It hummed with an energy that vibrated in the very marrow of his bones. The stone surface around it seemed to bend and shift, as if it were alive, adapting to the presence of the device. It was a machine, yes, but it was unlike any machine he had ever known. It pulsed with power, raw, untamed, and ancient. Daniel stepped closer, reaching out toward it. But as his fingers brushed the surface of the device, he felt a sharp pain in his chest. The world around him seemed to blur, his vision narrowing as the room spun. He collapsed to the floor, gasping for breath, his heart racing. The whispering began then. It was faint at first, just a whisper, a flutter of sound in the back of his mind. But then it grew louder, more insistent, until it was all he could hear. The voices were speaking to him, calling to him, urging him to listen, to understand. You've awakened it, the voice said. You've touched what should never be touched. And then, in a single blinding flash, the chamber was consumed by darkness. The price of knowledge. Daniel's vision swam as the darkness around him deepened. The whispers in his mind were no longer distant murmurs. They were sharp, like the clashing of metal, the voices growing louder, more insistent. He tried to move, but his body felt as though it were paralyzed, frozen in place. His heart hammered in his chest, the blood pulsing in his ears as if the very earth was alive, thrumming with energy. Suddenly there was a flash of light, a brilliant, blinding light that pierced through the dark like a spear. Daniel winced, shielding his eyes, and for a moment he could hear nothing but a high-pitched ringing in his ears. The light slowly dimmed, revealing the altar in front of him once more. But now it was different. The stone altar no longer seemed like a cold, lifeless object. It was alive, pulsing with an unnatural glow, as though the energy that had been dormant for centuries had awoken. The runes etched into its surface flickered like flames, casting shadows that danced wildly on the walls. And there, in the center, the device sat, its surface now shimmering, rippling like water. It seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat, drawing him in. Daniel's breath came in shallow gasps as he fought to rise to his feet. His limbs felt heavy as though they were made of stone, but somehow he managed to stand. His hands shook as he reached for the device once more, his fingers trembling with the urgency of his need to understand. It was as if something deep within him was telling him that this was the moment. The moment he would uncover the truth, the key to everything he had come to seek. But as his hand brushed the surface of the machine, a strange sensation washed over him. It was cold, far colder than anything he had ever felt. It was as though his very soul were being drawn into the machine, as if the device had a will of its own, pulling him toward it. And then, with a jolt that left his entire body aching, the machine activated. The ground beneath him trembled, and the walls of the cave seemed to shift. The whispers that had been so faint before were now deafening, surrounding him from all sides, speaking in languages he could not understand. He fell to his knees, his hands gripping the altar for support as the vibrations grew stronger, rattling his bones. You have awakened us, the voice in his mind said, the words now clear, unmistakable. The price has been paid. Daniel's eyes widened in horror as the air around him grew thick, suffocating. The shadows that had once seemed distant and harmless now closed in around him, twisting and writhing like serpents, their shapes becoming clearer, more defined. And then they took form. Figures appeared before him, their outlines faint at first, but slowly becoming more distinct. They were humanoid but twisted, unnatural. Their eyes were hollow, empty sockets that seemed to swallow the light around them, and their bodies were covered in strange markings, symbols that pulsed with the same eerie glow as the runes on the altar. These were the Elderkin. But they were no longer the peaceful, wise people who had once lived in the shadows of the forest. No, these were their spirits, trapped, twisted by the very knowledge they had once wielded. They had been consumed by the power they had sought to control, their souls forever bound to the machine, to the ancient device that Daniel had now activated. "You should not have come," one of the figures said, its voice hollow and distant. It was the elder, the same one who had warned him. But now, his face was no more than a rotting mask, his eyes dark and endless. "We were once like you, curious, seeking the power of the stars. But the price is too great?" Daniel struggled to speak, but his mouth was dry, his voice caught in his throat. He wanted to ask them questions, to demand answers, but all he could do was stare at them in terror. "The knowledge you seek," another figure said, stepping closer, its form flickering like a flame, "is cursed. It was never meant for human hands. It was the gift of the stars, and it was meant to be forgotten. Now it will consume you as it consumed us." Daniel's heart raced. No, this can't be happening," he whispered to himself. He tried to stand, tried to move, but the shadows were closing in on him, wrapping around his limbs like chains, pulling him down into the ground. The air grew colder, thicker, as if the very cave itself were alive, feeding off the energy that had been unleashed. But the whispers, those maddening, disembodied voices, continued to fill his mind, pushing him further into the darkness. "You have awakened the curse," they said. "And now it will take you." His chest tightened. He could feel it now, the cold, gnawing sensation of being consumed. His very soul was being pulled away from him, inch by agonizing inch, as the power of the ancient device drained him dry. "No," he gasped, his voice barely a whisper. "I didn't mean to. I just wanted to understand." The Elderkin spirits hovered over him, their forms shifting and contorting, their voices growing louder. "You will understand, Daniel. But it will be too late." And then, just as the darkness began to overtake him, the ground beneath him cracked open, a jagged fissure splitting the stone like a wound. From it, a blinding light burst forth, blinding him completely. The spirits shrieked in agony, their forms dissolving into the light as they were sucked into the rift, their cries echoing through the cave. The last thing Daniel saw before everything went dark was the face of the elder, the last spirit to disappear into the light. It was the same face he had seen when he first approached the village. But now it was different. His hollow eyes were filled with pity, sorrow. "You should have listened," the elder's voice whispered one last time, fading away into the abyss. Daniel awoke with a start, gasping for air. The world around him was still, silent. The cave was empty and the device was gone. The altar had crumbled to dust, leaving only the faintest traces of its once powerful energy. He sat up, rubbing his eyes, trying to understand what had just happened. Had it all been a dream? Had he truly woken up from the nightmare? But as his hands brushed against his chest, he froze. The necklace, the one he had come to seek, was still around his neck. But it was different now. The stone was no longer dark and cold. It glowed with a faint, eerie light. A light that pulsed just like the whispers that echoed in the back of his mind. And then, with a chill that sank deep into his bones, Daniel realized the truth. He hadn't awakened the curse. The curse had awakened him.